gosh! She's bald! She's bald and she's torturing people who have hair!
Don't make fun of my headset then, guys. Well, here we are. I'm finally caught up with what I've seen versus what I've made videos on. About a month ago, I watched Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, and Suicide Squad. One a week. And I severely underestimated, or overestimated, I should say, my ability to put these out in a timely manner. So here we are. February 28th is when I watched this movie, and it's gonna be, April by the time this comes out? Maybe March 31st if we're lucky? Well, if you clicked on the video, you know today we're talking about Suicide Squad, and this is a movie that I haven't seen since 2016, 2017. We recorded it on our DVR. I didn't see this in theaters, but I know it was around that time, like right when it had come out on TV and we could get our hands on it, you know? So yeah, I recently rewatched this movie and it is still not amazing. But in the last few years, the superhero genre in general has let me down on multiple occasions. So I feel like going into this movie with low, very low expectations, on the floor, under the floorboards expectations. I enjoyed this movie more than I expected to. There was a good 30-minute chunk of this movie in the first act that I thought to myself, wow, maybe this isn't as bad as I thought it was. Even though I knew, obviously, a lot of things that I didn't like about it, I still had that optimism of maybe it's just me, maybe I'm just cynical. And then after that 30 minutes was up, something happened and I was like, no, never mind, this is what I remember. As is becoming kind of a trend with these videos, let's talk about the negative first. And I want to start off with off-camera negative things. Number one, Suicide Squad should never have been the third movie in the DCEU. We talked about this with Batman vs. Superman. What kind of order is this? Again, we have part 2 to my Batman vs. Superman complaint about there being too many characters that you're trying to introduce in this movie. At least with Batman vs. Superman, people have more of a familiarity with Batman, and I'm talking about the general populace now, not deep comics fans. I'm talking about generally people have more of a familiarity with characters like Batman and Wonder Woman than they do with some of the Suicide Squad members. What they did with Suicide Squad was even more egregious in my opinion, because you had this error in judgment where you thought that you could bring all these characters that were not introduced in your universe yet into this movie and carry it forward. These aren't heroes, they are villains, and they weren't set up in any previous installments. A lot of casual fans and non-comic book fans alike do not know these characters and do not care about these characters. And even I myself, as someone who knows these characters, in this adaptation, I just didn't care about most of them. But this all stems from Warner Brothers executives not understanding what they're trying to do. Again, they wanted an MCU or an MCU equivalent, but they didn't want to put in the work to build it properly. They looked at what Marvel had and not how they got it. And I mean, what can you do? Those executives are no longer with Warner Brothers in the DC department, and good riddance. Whatever it was that made them think that they could just jump straight into a shared universe without building it is just beyond me. But while we're on the topic of behind the scenes negative things from the Suicide Squad, let's talk about casting. Casting is both a negative and a positive in this movie. It's what partially ruins this movie and partially saves it. For right now, let's just talk about the negative. Number one, Jared Leto did not need to be the Joker. Partially because he just doesn't fit, in my opinion at least. He just never seemed like the Joker. And number two, because he's freaking weird, dude. Sending, dead rats and used condoms to his castmates. Method acting cannot be used as this scapegoat for being weird. Can we agree on that, please? If the DCEU wasn't doomed to fail because of Batman vs. Superman errors, then it was definitely doomed to fail because of Suicide Squad errors. You were never gonna be able to build a DC shared universe that people loved, appreciated, and wanted more of when your two biggest miscasts were your two biggest arch nemesis in the entire universe. Joker and Lex Luthor were the biggest miscasts of the entire DCEU. That being said, I don't blame everything on Jared Leto in regards to the Joker. I want to piggyback off of this point into the next and final off-screen negative that I have with this movie, and that is the design choices for some of these characters are just not good. Any hope you had or may have had for Jared Leto as the Joker was destroyed by the fact that they made him a pimp. They didn't make him insane, they didn't make him crazy, they just made him kind of like a creep and a pimp. When I was rewatching this movie, I felt creeped out by Jared Leto's Joker, but not creeped out in the sense of, oh, he's an insane guy, he might try to kill me. No, I was laying there in bed watching this at night and I kind of felt like he wanted to touch me. When I was watching the scene where the prison guard was tied up in the chair, I felt like I needed to clench my butt cheeks, to be honest. Like, I was getting concerned for my safety. But in terms of design, it wasn't just the Joker that I wasn't a huge fan of. I wasn't really a fan of Harley Quinn's tattoos. Like, they're better than Joker's. Joker's are actual cringe. Joker's are like a 13-year-old did it. And then I wasn't really a fan of Killer Croc's design in this movie either. But I mean, nothing compares to the Joker. It's the most egregious design in this movie, and everything else is at least, forgivable. If you like Harley Quinn's like tattoos or you like Killer Croc's design, we can have a discussion about that. If you like the Joker's design and what they did with him, no, I'm sorry, I can't hear you out about that one. And I want to quickly say that this is a behind the scenes, off camera issue. The costuming and makeup departments did their job great. I think costuming won an Oscar that year for Suicide Squad, and I can't really say that that's undeserved just because they did their job really well. It's just conceptually, they didn't know what they were doing with these characters. Now, getting to what we actually do see on screen, I feel like there's less flaws on screen than flaws that happened off screen. Like, this movie was set up to fail by the off-screen antics, and then just what we got on screen wasn't good enough to save it. I know one of the big problems people have with the climax and the story of this movie is that we have to go stop a skybeam, and I know that that's happened plenty of times in cinema. TV shows, movies, animation, it's always just a mystery skybeam. Enchantress has to make a machine to destroy humanity or whatever, and it's just a skybeam. Like, there's stuff floating around and then it's a skybeam. And when we see it actually used later in the movie, like to attack things, it's literally just, okay, so the Enchantress's skybeam is going up, right? And then there's just another skybeam that comes down like a frickin' lightning bolt and just destroys things. Like, what am I supposed to take away from that? That you couldn't think of something better? Because that's what I'm taking away from that. It just feels like the writers said, we need something for them to come and stop, but we don't know what it's gonna be, and we never figured it out. Another thing that I don't think is quite up to standard is the writing. And don't get me wrong, the writing is fine in most of the movie, but there's just a couple of lines here and there that feel out of place when they're trying to make a character sound a certain type of way or feel a certain type of way, and the line just kind of comes off as cringe. For example,
are you sweet talking me?
And how about this one?
I'm not gonna kill you. I'm just gonna hurt you. Really, really bad.
Now, a couple of cringy lines don't really destroy this movie. The movie already is what it is with or without them, so it's just kind of something I figured I'd throw out there that I noticed during this recent rewatch. Something I really don't like that this movie did was throw a bunch of characters into the Suicide Squad, and why are they there? What I mean by that is Katana doesn't do anything in this movie. Not only is she not a villain, she's thrown into this movie to be the guard dog for Rick Flag and Amanda Waller, and then so that her sword can cut out Enchantress's heart at the end. Everything else is just, she's a glorified featured extra. She's a day player. Why is she in there? She's hardly even a character. Slipknot's another one. They throw him in there when they're gearing up to move out, and then he literally, I think he punches somebody, unless it's only Captain Boomerang that punches somebody, but he either punches somebody, zip lines up and blows up, or he just zip lines and blows up. Why is he in this movie? Other than to show that the bombs really are in their heads. But him as a character, like, he's fodder. He's there just to prove a point, to be a plot convenience, to be a plot point. There's no purpose to him being there other than that. Killer Croc's another one. What does he do in this movie? He punches a few of the little zombie things, and then he swims through the sewers with the underwater strike team at the end during the final act. But other than that, he's kind of just around in the movie, you know? He's not really serving a purpose throughout the movie. He's not really having dialogue and interactions throughout the movie. He's just kind of there for the end plot convenience, and it just seems like they didn't know what to do with him. I don't know, it just seems to me like the only real characters in the Suicide Squad are Rick Flag, Harley Quinn, Deadshot, Diablo, and then maybe Captain Boomerang. And that's not including the surrounding characters. I'm talking about just the squad. But everybody else just kind of is there. One of the things that really bothered me was that they tried to introduce all these characters with little, I don't know, like Smash Bros introductions, if you know what I'm talking about. Where they show us like, what, a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes maybe of each character in this whole montage. Some of these characters only get like 30 seconds or less. But they tried to introduce all these characters at the beginning of the movie and act like that was enough for us to care about each of these characters. I think Deadshot's was probably the closest you get to caring about his character from this little montage, but again, this is just you trying to compensate for the fact that you didn't introduce any of these characters earlier. And that's what you needed to do. This wasn't going to work, and it really didn't. The last negative thing I'm gonna say about this movie is another writing problem. Now, we have the cringy lines that we just talked about. Those pale in comparison to just the plot convenience writing. And what I mean by that is, how did we get from this?
Own it. What do you think was gonna happen? Huh?
Hey, Harley, come on.
Well, you would just... You can have a happy family and coach little leagues and make car payments?
To this.
I lost one family, I ain't gonna lose another one.
It kind of just feels like some of these character progressions are plot convenience, and we got some payoffs that we didn't really deserve. And for everyone who hasn't seen the movie in a long time, some of these characters only have like 1 or 2 lines between this scene and the next scene. There is no development in the middle. It just happens. Now that we've gotten all the negative I can think of out of the way, let's talk about the 2 biggest positives that I can think of that came out of this movie. The first one being, casting was incredible in this movie. And now, I know we talked about this, casting with an asterisk, because Joker was obviously terrible, the worst miscast in the entire DCEU, but everyone else was really good. So how did we get here? How did this happen? Everyone else fit their part really well, so it's just so confusing how we can go from one extreme to the other. It just really confuses me that you could give us the worst miscast in the entire DCEU, Jared Leto as the Joker, but you could also give us top 3, arguably number 1, best casting, Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn. It just blows my mind that one person could make such a great, inspired decision and then just a terrible one. The second and really only other big positive to come out of this movie is that we got the reboot. The Suicide Squad was so much better than this first Suicide Squad. I stand by that. I don't hate this movie as much as I thought I did, but I will not hear anybody out if they say that the second one is worse than the first one. And this goes straight out to you, William, if you're watching this. This first one is not better than the second one. In any category, in any way, by any metric, ever. Since the negative portion of this video is going to be so much longer than the positive, I want to quickly talk about something that I did like about this movie, and it's that one CGI shot where Dr. Moon changes into Enchantress in like the meeting room, and the hands go like whoosh. I can't do it obviously, but you know what I mean. I'll put it right. Boop.
Enchantress.
In my opinion, that's the coolest CGI shot in this movie. Well, all in all, I did enjoy this movie more for the rewatch than I did the first time I watched this movie years ago. And I think it's the same situation as Batman vs. Superman, where my expectations are literally on the floor. So when you watch it, you can't help but have fun with it, because it's not really that bad. There's a certain amount of you just being dramatic, thinking that it's a terrible movie, and in some parts rightfully so, but not all of it's bad. Every movie has its positives and negatives, and even if the negatives are a little bit higher in this movie than most, you could still look at the positives and have a decent time watching it. If you've watched my previous DCEU videos, you know that I'm going through the entire DCEU right now, with Zack Snyder's Justice League and Peacemaker at the end, just for reasons that I've already explained, and I won't do it again. Until maybe next video at least. I think Wonder Woman is next in the lineup. I have watched Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman, and now Suicide Squad, and I've made those videos, so now I'm finally going to be caught up. I'm going to watch Wonder Woman and then make that video. I'm not going to try to backlog myself again, or else it's going to be the same situation where I've got stuff in my head that I'm trying to remember and I'm just not making the videos. So I'm going to watch that, and then that video will be out hopefully not long after. I was talking last video about what I was going to wear that was on brand for Suicide Squad. Didn't have anything. I knew that already. So I decided to just go with my inner Deadshot. If you want to give me a like, comment, subscribe, anything helps. And yeah, I'll see you in the Wonder Woman video, which will hopefully be soon. Bye.